Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining me right now from Washington, D.C. is Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, a member of the Foreign Relations and Budget Committee. Senator, thanks for being with us.
Hello, John. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Well, let's start with this announcement Monday out of Syria, also out of Russia as well. Syria says it welcomes a Russian proposal to place Assad's chemical weapons stockpile under the watch of international monitors. This in trade for a promise from the U.S. not to strike Damascus. The White House says they are open to the idea, but at the same time not backing down from the president's threat of a military strike. Are you open to this idea, Senator Johnson?
I'm absolutely open to it. It's really what we should be doing. Let's face it, one of the stated goals of President Obama's strategy here is to deter the use of chemical weapons. Obviously, if you've got Russia at least talking, if not putting realistic pressure on the Assad regime to give up its chemical weapons stockpile, or at least to secure them, put those under international control, that certainly is going to deter the use. And, John, part of my problem in this strategy of the Obama administration of military action, we've signaled it, we've lost the element of surprise. I'm concerned that ineffective military action, let's face it, that's what we're talking about right now. They've dispersed those assets. People are talking about a calibrated, a tailored, a unbelievably limited response. That to me is almost worse than no action. If President Assad could emerge after that strike, claim victory, that would be not a very good thing. Plus, I'm concerned that a military action would divert world's attention away from the heinous war crimes of the Assad regime and allow our adversaries to start pointing out the almost unilateral action on the part of the United States if it engages in military action. So I'm looking for a strategy that will actually work, and I think condemning, shaming anybody that would support the Assad regime, I think would probably be a better one, and I think this is actually a pretty good step. Hopefully it's a sincere step of Russia trying to work with us to get that international control over the chemical weapons stockpiles, which, by the way, that is the national security interest at stake here, is those chemical weapons stockpiles possibly falling in the hands of al-Qaeda elements or being transferred to Hezbollah.
And that's absolutely correct. Now, we've heard Secretary Kerry kind of endorse this plan, and a little bit later, after Secretary Kerry this morning, we heard from Senator Clinton, former Secretary of State. She emerged today to say something about Syria and kind of backed up what Secretary Kerry said this Russian proposal is an important step. Now, can we trust the Russians on something like this? The relationship between the United States and Russia has been so adversarial these last couple of weeks. Do you think that Russia is really a willing and legitimate partner on a plan like this?
Well, let's use the Reagan approach, trust but verify. So no, again, I think this creates an opening. It certainly shows how you can isolate Russia or any regime that would, or any government that would actually back the Assad regime, because who really, what civilized human being or civilized nation could back or support the use of chemical weapons against a nation's own citizens? So this is an opportunity to try and take advantage of. If we can avoid military action, I think that'd be a good thing. So let's really push this hard and put a lot of pressure on Russia to follow through on this. But in the end, no, we're going to have verification. But this is one use that the UN comes in that can certainly be utilized. UN inspectors, and let's really take advantage of this possible opening.
And then what happens next if that step were to take place?
Well, I agree with the Obama administration that the only real solution in Syria is a negotiated settlement. What we don't want is another failed state in the Middle East. So what you would like to do is work with Russia, who basically has been working with the Assad regime, and we have got to really take the head of that regime out of Syria. They've got to be removed from government. But as much as possible, if we can leave the governing institutions in place in Syria and try and develop a governing coalition that is going to be far more Western-leaning, far more democratic, far more respectful of the rights of all Syrians, I think that's really the ultimate solution. But we're a long ways from that, and it's going to be a very difficult journey to get to that point.
A hard lesson learned from Egypt there is stability more important than democracy, at least in the initial beginnings of a new government. Now, the president had dinner last night with a few Senate Republicans. He's earned some bipartisan support on this, but the White House is a long way from getting the votes they need. You, of course, voted no in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee last week on the Syria plan. The president is taking his case to the network news anchors and to the American public tomorrow night. But what do you still need to hear from the president specifically to change your no vote to a yes vote if there is going to be a military strike?
The reason I voted no, certainly in committee, is we voted 25 hours after the first hearings began, and let's face it, the formal debate in the Senate began. There were far too many unanswered questions, and John, part of the problem is I'm not sure you can get the answers to the questions that we really need answered before we're to engage in military action. I mean, what are the rebel forces? I mean, who are they? How many of them are there? What is the composition? If the Assad regime were to fall, who would take their place? And I simply do not believe that it's possible to calibrate, to fine-tune, to tailor a military response that doesn't have the potential of spinning out of control. I mean, if those chemical weapons were to start being moved and were in danger of falling into the hands of al-Qaeda, for example, that is something that's a direct threat to America. That's something that would take a far more robust military reaction than just lobbing cruise missiles. So again, we need to be very careful. We have to have a number of questions answered that, again, I'm not sure it's really possible to answer these questions before we should really engage in military action.
Well, we know he's going to put on a full court press. I know you've talked about this in this interview and other interviews as well. You want to try and shame the rest of the world into a response from these chemical weapons attack. But the White House, Secretary Kerry, they've been trying to do that for a couple of weeks now. It clearly hasn't worked, of course, with no additional support coming out of the G20 summit. But the world still looks to us to lead in NATO, in the UN, and because the president drew that rhetorical red line you just talked about, if we don't act, won't that shame be on America alone?
Well, first of all, this is a case that we should have been making for the last 2.5 years. It's almost impossible to garner that kind of world and public support in just a couple of weeks, and the Obama administration is starting to understand that. John, what I do not believe is at stake right now is America's long-term credibility. I certainly believe President Obama's credibility is at stake here. I'm not sure there's a whole lot we can really do to restore President Obama's credibility, and that's going to be a problem for America for the next 3 years under this administration. But we certainly saw that after the end of the Carter administration, the election of a strong leader, President Obama, we changed the equation in terms of American credibility overnight as our hostages were returned from Iran. So again, this isn't about America's long-term credibility. It certainly it does concern the short-term credibility while President Obama is in office, and that is something I'm highly concerned about. But again, I'm not sure there's a whole lot we can really do about this.
Well, in terms of President Obama's credibility, this has been defined as one of the most crucial periods in the Obama presidency, and the decision to defer to Congress for approval for a military strike was politically risky as well. But what if the president cannot get that congressional approval? And we don't know if he's going to do this, but if he decides to act anyway, can you imagine him doing that? And if so, do you believe he has the authority to do so?
I do believe the president has the authority to act. I think at this point in time, it would not be helpful. It would be extremely harmful if he pressed a vote in Congress and lost. And I think he has to that definitely has to enter in his equation, which is why my advice to this administration would be to really push hard. Take advantage of what Russia has said in terms of trying to gain control through the international community of the stockpile of chemical weapons. And I would push that really hard while I continue to attempt to make the case to the world to garner that world support. I agree with Secretary Kerry, with this administration. This really should be the world's red line. This should be humanity's red line, but we've got to make that case, and there's nobody who's in a better position as the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, to make that case. We just have not made it effectively or long enough, and these types of things take time. We need to take that time.
Well, Senator, this issue of Syria is certainly a galvanizing one, and one that the entire nation is paying attention to. Thank you very much for your time and your insight, sir. You have a great day.
You too.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.